Hello and welcome, I'm Peasant, and today I'm going to be looking at how to pick powers. So it's just a general overview, like the theory. Thanks so much, Scott, for the idea. He just suggested it, and I just did it. So, well, what a world. Have I missed anything? I'm just looking at my notes down here. If I miss anything, feel free to comment, and if I've missed enough stuff, I'll just do another video. How about that? One other thing to note is I'm not going to actually go into any examples in this one, but basically pretty much every one of my over-explain videos or zero-run videos, I really try and go to town on those power picks because it is one of the most interesting decisions in the game. Not so much on the higher difficulty runs because I've got to leave space for, you know, being difficult. So that's our intro. So first thing you do when you're thinking about your power pick is choose, is it a major, is it a minor? It all depends on the situation. But even before that, don't place your presence before you pick your power. And if you're playing multi-spirit, you might want to look at your power choices and then go to the other spirit if you want to make the optimal possible move. So let's say one spirit is looking at a minor power, you draw the cards, look at them, and then knowing that information, then you can go over and maybe if they're gaining a power, you can look at them out. That might be the way to find the optimal, strongest solution, but it also might be too much to take if you're playing multi-spirit. But yeah, that's worth noting. Okay, so what goes into major or minor decision? Why would you pick a minor power? Because energy constraints. And typically most spirits want to start off looking at minor powers. There are some that are less inclined to do that. But most, let's generalize about this, most of them. Another thing to bear in mind if you're playing with these bad boys in the game, events, you might want to favor minor powers a little bit more than you would otherwise, because there are some of the events if you can afford to discard cards from your hand, or even forget cards, you can get the favorable version of events, which is, it's better. Another thing to think about with are you going major or minor is, do you need a YOLO major? Is your situation so dire that you need one of these kinds of cards, YOLO majors? You'll notice that these ones I've picked out here are all these YOLO majors are mostly base game. 4 out of 5 of these core YOLO majors are in the base game. So if you're playing with expansions, you're less likely to be able to draw a YOLO major. Well, you're more likely to not draw a YOLO major, whereas in pure base, you've got good odds of drawing one of these effectively fast, prevent the consequences of a ravage cards. So that might kind of feed in. You might just need a card like that to solve your problem. The minor power deck is that much bigger, even in base. So you could, if you're looking for a defend card to keep you in the game, you might well just not draw one. So the YOLO major thing comes in. And then there's also what spirit you are. So these spirits in particular, you really are most likely going to be gaining major powers most of the time. And certainly the first few powers you gain, you probably, Bringer doesn't make any sense if you don't gain majors early. your mileage may vary, but it'll be wrong mileage. Okay, and one other thing while we're thinking about that, do you pick a major, do you pick a minor power, is don't wait too late on the majors, especially as you might be ramping up the difficulty. Getting an earlier major will seriously power you up as a spirit. Now, I really personally favor going with a lot of minor powers and working with the spirits innate. That's just my play style, but often if you can get a major early, you're gonna, they're really gonna help. Like Indomitable Claim here. Oh, that's not Indomitable Claim. That's Indomitable Claim. Getting this one here will help you place your presence. And there are a whole slew of majors that are actually just great in the early game, and then they just not so great later on. So, okay, you've made your decision about major or minor. I'm going to talk about minors now. So, minor powers. You in there. The first consideration is often about what elements the power has on it. So, especially with the minor powers, I think one of the things that really powered up my game when I was first getting into Spirit Island was realizing how useful it is to trigger your innate. They're just free abilities that do cool stuff. I've got a Bringer here. Look at these cool abilities that just do stuff. Fear. Looking at stuff. Wow. So the elements are often absolutely critical. So that tends to be an important thing to look at. And with some spirits, the elements are really important. Like Fangs here, getting plants and beast cards so you can use this innate is absolutely critical to doing well. I would think, most of the time, if you're going kind of on-piste rather than off-piste. So elements, and typically the ones related to your name. If you've already got a major power, then it might be the elements to get threshold. But with a lot of major powers, sometimes the threshold actually isn't that important. So a threshold like this is important. That basically is a whole extra forfeit worth pursuing. But then you get some thresholds that are, like Indomitable Claim is a good example. This threshold is good, but you know, I would argue that most of the time without threshold is just as good, and sometimes preferable even if you have the threshold. So that's the first consideration when you're going for a minor power, most of the time for me. And that can help narrow the choices down. But then you've got to think about, what's it going to do for my board position right now? You know, is it going to give me the defend to prevent a ravage, keep the island healthy? You know, there's lots of things like that. Typically it's around things like defend cards, but it can get more complex if you're playing with more spirits. Okay, another consideration when you're looking at a minor power card is, does it address this spirit's particular weakness? And an example of that would be Lightning Swift Strike, for example. It really struggles to gain cards. If you got the card that is behind me here, Gift of Power, which helps you gain more minor powers, then that is, although the elements are horrible for lightning likes fire and air, and Gift of Power gives you pretty much every other element apart from the ones you really want, but it helps you address your specific weakness. So that makes it a very good pick for lightning. Other spirits have their own specific weaknesses that if you can solve them with a minor power or help against those specific weaknesses, then you maybe can ignore the elemental effects. You can maybe even ignore that it might prevent a blight going down this turn, depending on the spirit. But you know, there are 24 spirits in the official game. I'm going to go through one, but the most straightforward example is lightning with something like Gift of Power that gains them power. Often, like, just getting the first defend card can be really great for some spirits that might be moving people around, but don't start with a defend card. But, you know, that's a key consideration. We've got elements. What can it do for me right now? Does it address a spirit's weakness? And then you've got to think about cost. So minor powers are either 0 or 1 cost, and I don't underestimate the zeros. They are great, especially if you're getting towards the mid and late game and you're playing a spirit with a lot of plays. Even if they do very little, even if their effect is basically here's 1 damage, don't underestimate. And the same thinking about slow powers. Remember that a slow power, you can actually use it to respond to the explore. And if you're looking at your invader deck, you can have a decent idea of what's likely to explore, or what's possible to explore and what's not. Final thing when picking a minor, this is minor power, and this is also true for mages, is targeting. Can you target it? So you notice these YOLO mages that I dragged out earlier. A lot of them actually need sacred sites. Infinite Vitality, Paralyzing Fright, and Winds need sacred sites. So that's something else to bear in mind. If you're in a position that might need a YOLO major, you might need sacred sites. But then, if you're looking at cards and you're a spirit like Fangs, that if you play well, probably you don't have any sacred sites. You can make sacred sites, but it's not ideal. It's probably, it might work out okay, but it's not your forte is having sacred sites. It's having beasts instead of presents. So that's another consideration. Is it something you can target? Let's say you get offered Jungle Hungers and you've got no presence anywhere near a jungle and are not likely to have it soon. You know, that kind of thing. So you've got to pick a power that you can actually target. That also is going to apply. A lot of this stuff is going to also apply to mages, but now we're into the major section. So, consideration, can you get threshold? We've already gone over why you don't necessarily care, but it can make a big difference. Some powers, like for example, like Infinite Vitality is actually a pretty great card. It can be a bit stalling, depending on, you know, what adversary you're against or what have you. But the threshold on here, it basically means that you are removing an additional blight in the fast phase, as well as preventing however many blight are going to go down in the ravage from the top bit. So this is an example, I think, of a card where the threshold is worth pursuing, because it just suddenly means that blight just isn't a problem anymore. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. When you're picking a major power, does it solve a problem? The thing that's different, of course, to the minors is, can you afford it, right? And that's the thing of, is it a major power that I'm going to play once? So that's typically the kind of thing. Ocean might have that experience of, because they've got a kind of variable amount of energy that it might have. Am I going to be playing this major power once? Is that going to be a worthwhile thing, or is it something I'm going to be playing all the time? So with experience, you might go, oh, Bringer, we want to get a major for Bringer. But if you're getting too expensive for Bringer, so you might not be able to play it repeatedly. So like, for example, I would say with Bringer that you don't really like your ideal major power is something more in the cost of 4 or 3 rather than 5 or more. There are some great powers for Bringer, like sea monsters that are 5 or more, but you're going to find it harder to afford them without help from other spirits. So is that thing of like, is it actually something I can afford? Is it something I could, you know, or is it just one I'm playing once? And that can be pretty good with your mages. You can just go with an approach of, I'm going to use it once, and then I maybe look at another major and see if I can, you know, see if I can kind of flip mages, kind of getting the best out of them. That's pretty much my notes. So yeah, let me know what you think. Like the video if you like the video, and if you have any other pointers I might have missed. I think I've covered the important stuff there. And yeah, gonna get to the out screen now. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.